And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Happy Liberation Day to all those who celebrate. I actually am thankful that we had an extra day just to take in all of the theories, all of the thoughts. Is this smart? Did we just end our country? Everything in between. But
All the
of
feels.
course, today I'm joined by Erica and Josh. Josh, welcome back to the program. You were missed. You're beloved by the audience. We're glad to have you back.
Good to be back.
Awesome. So today we're going to get into tariff talk, and I really just want to honestly say exactly what Trump did here, be very specific, and then we can get into a bit of the reactions, especially from the world at this point. We have a talk about the death penalty, a very contentious conversation on this podcast specifically, but for Catholics all over the country, specifically with Luigi Mangione. We saved it for this episode for you guys.
We did. We saved it for you, Josh.
Yes. And then we get into a little bit of Orchid, I believe is the program of embryo selection. Not pumped, but important to talk about. That is right on the rise. So if I may, I'm not even going to show any clips because you guys all saw the cards that were brought out by the president. You saw Basent go out and talk. We have some clips in here, but I'm going to get right to it. Okay. What did Trump do exactly for people who were not paying super close attention? So one, he implemented a baseline tariff. So Trump introduced a universal 10% tariff on all goods imported into the United States. Doesn't matter where it's from. Could be a country with no people. That actually was a part of the card situation.
And in fact, yes, that happened too.
Just penguins. 10%. Everything that comes to this country is going to be hit with a 10% tariff. And then number two, he implemented reciprocal tariffs. So in addition to that baseline, he unveiled reciprocal tariffs targeting around 60 countries he identified as having significant trade imbalances or high tariffs on U.S. goods. Now, people were quick to try to figure out what exactly this calculation was. In terms of the deficit, I believe at this point, Twitter sleuth figured it out. It is just taking the imbalance and dividing it by two.
Right.
Imbalance calculation, including laws that are beyond just a straight up tariff. So say, for example, I believe Australia has a law where they will not allow our beef to be sold in their country. That would be a good example. They brought up the VAT tax, which actually I don't think is a perfect application, but an example of something they consider going into this calculation. And so for those curious, this could be absolutely massive in some cases. In the case of China, we're talking about 50% tariff all in on China, which is huge. For comparison, I think I have the previous administration had an average of a 2% tariff on anything for every country. So massive change. Number three, specific targets. So the plan includes previously announced tariffs on items like steel, that would be 25%, aluminum, foreign-made cars, now expanded to a broader range of goods and countries. So, for example, the European Union is going to face a 20% tariff, while nations like Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia could see rates up to 50%. It's like Oprah with tariffs. Everyone's getting a tariff. So why did he do this? Now, from the White House, why did he do this? Trump claims that these tariffs will revive U.S. manufacturing, bring factories back to American soil, and generate revenue to fund tax cuts. Three, which I think is probably, they're kind of cute about it, but it's the real purpose, to get concessions from trade partners, either them removing their tariffs on the United States, and some countries have done this in a couple of cases, but also change their rules. In the case of Australia, allow us to sell our beef there. There's a lot of non-tariff quantified regulations against the United States that I'm sure the United States would like to see changed. Another example of this would be TikTok needs to be for sale soon. Hey, China, maybe you sell us TikTok. We take some of these tariffs off. It's used as a leveraging chip. So it's important. These don't go into effect until April 5th. So right now we're at the 4th, which is tomorrow, which is crazy close. I'm sure they anticipated this going into effect.
4th is today.
The 4th is today. So I'm sure they anticipated these go into effect before people can actually change. And then the reciprocal tariffs take impact on April 9th. So there is a little bit more of a runway, not very much time, but there theoretically is a time period for people to take them off or change the policy. One thing that I think, honestly, everyone agrees with is just as crazy as this happened to begin with. He closed a loophole called the de minimis rule, and it's used by, it's basically the Temu and Shein rule, right? I think everyone was just like, it's crazy this existed.
Yeah.
Products under a certain amount of money, de minimis in Latin, I believe is actually like trifling. It's basically saying
number.
that
very minimal.
If you were to bring something over in a small number, so like $800, $900 per shipment, you don't get any duty, any tariffs. So that's how places like Temu and Shein exist, right?
Bye
Because
Shein.
you could buy for $3.
They went direct to consumer. So
Right.
they didn't import it to some guy who then sold it. which
Right.
there would be tariffs for. Yeah.
And before we get into more of the philosophical stuff, is this a massive change? Why is everyone freaking out about it? The stock market's in the red. Yes. This in the modern era, there's nothing that comes close to what was just announced. So like I said, previously we had about 1.4% tariffs on goods coming into the country. That's one of the world's lowest, with many goods actually entering duty-free via trade deals that we've made. The most notable being NAFTA, North Atlantic Free Trade. Is it association or agreement?
North American Free Trade Association that got replaced by UMCA. United
Yes.
States, Mexico,
Mexico,
Canada
Canada
agreement.
agreement.
It is a massive change. So
Yeah.
We actually have a separate agreement with Canada too that we've had since 1985, and that was the basis for which we would later go to other countries and say, "Do you want to get our most favored nation status?" Because then we would just say, "We'll basically treat you like we treat Canada." That's what it means. So like when 90s were going on and we're like, why would we consider China our most favored nation? Like we're not. We're just, and I didn't support it, but it was just a question of whether or not we would give China the same great deals at low tariffs that we're giving Canada. So just in case you know what the most favored nation, we don't hear that as much anymore. But
yeah. So to effectively lay all this out, I wanted to try to steelman both sides here and give the case on behalf of Trump for this more protectionist policy. And I also want to bring up the other side of the argument. And because I think there are people that are reasonable and that I agree with in other areas that are for this. So Erica, if you could lay out the case, because Josh, I think you're a little bit more skeptical. If you could lay out the case for tariffs philosophically, why is he doing this now?
All right. This is going to be hard for me because actually in the last 6 days, I think my view of tariffs, which I actually didn't have a view on tariffs until about a week ago, as I tried to start understanding this, has just gone round and round. But I'll do my best here. I think that Orrin Cass did a really good job of steelmanning the argument for the tariffs. And the premise that he laid out that he can decipher, this is what the Trump team is operating on, is that the costs to the United States of maintaining the so-called liberal world order, that is the post-World War II order, the costs have come to outweigh the benefits, basically. And that we now run this trade deficit that is somehow an attack and a threat to our national security. It's a threat to our economy, leaning into the sort of hillbilly elegy diagnosis of the American economy, that over the last 40 years, undeniably, we've lost manufacturing jobs. We've seen sort of the gutting out of middle America, and the offshoring of a lot of our, not only our manufacturing, but also where we get things that we use day to day. And admittedly, Trump said this in his speech, the United States is the author, in a way, of this crisis itself, because this was our own doing in many ways. So what is the case that the Trump administration is making? There's a few different ones, a few different cases that have been made by, like you mentioned, Scott Bessent, J.D. Vance, all over the media. Basically, the case is, one, we want balanced trade. So you charge us tariffs, we charge you tariffs, and sort of banking on this common sense, okay, trade deficits are bad. They are not good for the American people, which is where I start to think, maybe not always, but so we just have to have balanced trade, and this is how we're going to do it. Whether or not these particular tariffs achieve that, big question mark. Second, the idea of burden owning. That other countries who pay like 1.6% of their GDP to defense should no longer be relying on the United States to make up the difference for them in their defense. There is no minimum. We need countries all over the world taking ownership of their own country's needs. So in a way, this could be good for other countries as well as for the United States. And then third, China needs to just be out. Like, we are in a trade war with China. Other countries need to get on board, or they can't enjoy the benefits of the American market. And to me, these are like the sort of the three main threads that I see being the best arguments for this. I mean, this is wild. This is crazy, right? These numbers are insane. And calling it a national emergency too. Trump, last point, Josh, and then I'll let you go. Trump's basing his authority to make these massive tariff changes on an emergency stipulation that the president has, in cases of emergency, national emergency, the power to inflict these these huge tariffs on other countries. Whether or not it's actually emergency, again, be happy to discuss that. But that seems to be one of the keystone arguments that the Trump administration is using as to why this wild, why right now.
Josh?
Well, so if we have tariffs, if they're increased on the European nations in a way to try to extract more money out of them because they're not doing their due diligence and paying their fair share for NATO, I think that's great. I think that's a good policy.
I can see that.
The other thing would be to tax the dickens out of China as a sort of an arbitrage, because basically China is using base communism and slave labor to undercut the markets. And so if you put a tax that effectively makes it just as with all the taxes makes and tariffs or taxes, if you put these tariffs on these Chinese goods and also Vietnam, because Vietnam is apparently acting as a funnel for China on this stuff. So if you put these tariffs on it so that the goods from China no longer get that slavery bonus where they're cheaper, so that they're basically just on par with goods from other countries that actually have, civil rights, then that's also another great example of where tariffs are very beneficial. The thing that kind of frustrated me, and overall, actually, I'm pretty okay with protectionist ideas and policies or whatever. I mean, I'd love it for the United States and Canada to have a very robust free trade on a bunch of stuff. And I did not know until very recently that they tax us so high on like cheese and some of the stuff just to protect the dairy industries or whatever. It's like, okay, fine. Then maybe, we do again, this kind of reciprocal stuff, or again, Canada has got the best country in the world in a sense. Like, they don't have to spend any money on defense. Who's going to invade them? They're right next to the United States. I mean, like they're enjoying a benefit even better than the United States. Or than Europe, I should say. So tariffs make sense there too. The thing that made me really kind of, I don't know, disappointed was that this idea that the rate at which we're going to charge the tariffs was the trade imbalance. And a trade imbalance is, not inherently a problem.
Right.
If we have, let's say, a trade imbalance with Colombia, and it's because we give them a bunch of cash to buy a bunch of coffee because we love coffee. And if Colombia is like, we don't really need American stuff, we're going to buy stuff from our other countries. We need lumber from Brazil or whatever. That's fine. Like, we're still getting something out of it. We're getting coffee. And if they want to, and they're making money by selling this coffee, great. And then they can do something else. The problem with the trade imbalance I have is when it's a place like China, where they're using currency manipulation, slave labor to undercut us, to come slit our throats in 30 years. Yeah, that's the problem I have with it. I totally understand and respect Trump going after Canada. Like, we're so cool and hardly tax anything that you bring in. And then you have these wickedly high rates on dairy and cheese and all this stuff. So to do some of that to try to get policies to change, I'm all for it. But the point is, there are some countries that had almost no tax on us, no tariffs on us, and we give them a massive tariff because to correct the trade imbalance. It's like, well, that's actually kind of reckless, because then these countries are going to start taxing the heck out of our stuff. And I do think that's a lose-lose. If there's a country that doesn't tax us or put much tariffs on us, I don't want to jack up the rates on it. So some of this, I'm in generally positive about Trump's policies. I just feel like someone in the policy shop that recommended, well, we'll just have the tariff at the rate to correct the trade imbalance. That's not the answer.
Yeah, like I'm a fan of I feel like we are in the Hulk smash scene of an Avengers movie, right? Where he's just smashing and there are things that ought to be smashed, right? I am all for smashing the Department of Education. I think that what they're doing at the State Department was great. All of that needed to just be eviscerated. This is a little bit different because there are so many threads to be pulled, and I think that the unpredictability factor, when you apply it to the economy, can have much more disastrous short-term effects. And the reality is, I'm worried that this will, if the gamble does not pay off, right? This is going to be really bad for the midterms. Like this is just so bad. And what I don't want is for Republicans and social conservatives to pay the price for really bad fiscal policy in the future. And like suddenly we're censored again and we have to worry about the FBI like coming to our homes again. That's what I don't want the trade-off.
Well, that won't happen for 4 years, and therefore you have a longer
Yeah,
Trump is still
export
president
myself.
for 4 years. So it's like you have,
Yeah.
again, the chances of us losing the Senate are not nothing, but they're
Right.
pretty low. The chances of us losing the House are already going to be kind of high anyway, because we have like a 4-seat majority. And, anyway, so, I mean, I just kind of bank on the fact we're probably going to lose the House. I give it at about a 65% chance,
Mhm.
Yeah,
But this
Excuse me.
is a gamble, and it could pay off well. I mean,
It could pay off bigly
yeah, I mean, it could be like
or
everyone's
not.
looking at the stock market and stuff like that. It's like, well, like, let's look at what happens. Like, there's someone who's saying like, oh my gosh, the tariffs on paper now are so high. We're going to have to open up a factory in Maine and hire people here. Like,
Yeah.
it
That's kind of
sounds
the
like
point.
it's not a problem. That
No,
sounds,
I think the best, so beyond implementation, because I think everyone's making their best guess why he implemented the way that he did, and chalk this up to, not the first time Trump has just announced something crazy like, I don't know, taking over Gaza. Like, this is kind of his thing, and then he
but he did
usually
it
ends
this
up winning
time.
at the end. So I think it's worthy to wait and see. I agree, Scott Percent, wait and see.
Mhm.
That's kind of where I am at right now. But philosophically, like you want to, the argument of the steel man of complete free trade. These people exist, right? Like the Cato Institute, AEI. There's a lot of think tanks that have really cut their teeth on. We should have absolute free trade. Tariffs are inefficient. Maybe they would concede it as a negotiating tool, but they're just free trade. China, give them money, whatever. And so to steel man, and I've seen this brought up a few times.
Keep
The
saying
argument,
steel man. Help me understand this term. What do you mean by
yeah,
this?
steel man would be like an argument that even if I disagree with it, I'm going to try to give it the most charitable interpretation.
It's the
Okay.
Thomas
What is the
Aquinas approach, yeah.
right? It's a good faith argument, basically. I'm making a good faith argument on behalf of free trade at all costs. And so the argument against manufacturing, to reshore manufacturing, you brought it up in Maine, but right now in terms of output, U.S. manufacturing is at all-time highs. It similar, I think it's up 177% since 1975. The concession is, yes, jobs fell. Manufacturing jobs fell from 19.6 million in 79 to about 13 million in 2025.
But the
They
total
would
amount of
argue,
manufacturing output is higher, you're saying.
yes, they would argue that that's due to automation and efficiency,
Robots,
not
right.
actually due to, an offshoring process. They also will say that real family income has spiked $28,000 since NAFTA was enacted. Overall wealth rose close to 500%, outpacing inflation 5 times over that time. U.S. per capita income over the past 10 years is unrivaled. The middle class has only shrunk because of the growth of the upper middle class. Tariffs are meant to prop up a small number of antiquated union jobs in the Rust Belt at the expense of millions of others. We're not, quote, bringing back manufacturing jobs lost to automation, which is most of them. We already have plenty of high-tech, high-paying jobs. That would be the argument of David Harsanyi at, I think it's Washington Examiner made that argument. Harsanyi,
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
thing is with like, for example, automotive, like a majority of the cars made in the United States aren't even made in Michigan or Ohio anymore.
They're
The
assembled
majority-
in the United States.
I know, but I mean, like the majority of cars that are assembled in the United States are in the South at this point. I mean, like you're talking, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas. There's a ton of these states that are, cranking out cars. I mean, like someone even made the point that like, what was it? The Toyota Camry is like the ultimate American car because it's like 80% of it's made in the United States, which is higher than some Ford trucks, which are manufactured in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest strategic things, it's again, I just like it's not always dollars and cents. And so you have to think a little bit more strategically about it. Like apparently 97% of our antibiotics are made in China.
Yeah,
But
India and China pharmaceuticals.
India and China.
dominate.
Now, it
Yeah.
used to always be just, I mean, I feel less
Don't love
problematic
that.
about India, but
I still feel problematic. Well, I mean, look what
less
happened in 2020.
problematic is what I said. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my point. So again, it's, like whether the paper's made in a mill in Maine or Canada, I mean, it's not a total wash, but yeah, I care about, are we, if we ever get into another panic situation like we did with the, the scamdemic, like we need to be able to have antibiotics here in the United States, not just manufactured in China. We relied on them for everything. And even when we had deals, the government from China said, "Oh, actually, don't send those respirators. We need them here."
Mhm.
They just basically did national emergency kind of stuff. Like, I mean, I can't even really blame them. I get it, but like,
Right. I think for me, bottom line is tariffs are a tool. Trade deficits are a reality that aren't always bad. And like all things, all of these economic tools should be used in moderation, especially tariffs for like targeted reasons, like you're saying the antibiotics. Like I would love to see antibiotics manufactured at least in North America for North Americans, right? Like that's a really good example of something very specific. But what this felt like in going through it, going after, since Liberation Day and it all dropped, this feels like going from one extreme and swinging all the way to the other, right? And it seems that some of these are just ridiculous. Like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, Tom. I'm bringing up Israel, right? Okay, Israel. So we're using these tariffs. So this was actually funny. Before I get into Israel, the only nation state with people living in it to escape the tariffs was the Holy See, right? So the Vatican somehow doesn't. Anyway, good job, Brian.
That's Catholic President Brian Burke.
Yeah, thank you,
Shout out,
Brian,
Brian.
for I hope all the cardinals are sending you flowers and Italian wine today. But anyway, so Israel, right, 99% of their goods that they import from the United States, there's no tariff on it. It's zero. It's absolutely zero. But they still get slapped with a 17% tariff with this, and so it seems that that's sort of
They dropped all
that's
their tariffs,
lacking.
but
They dropped them all, but
Yeah.
this is lacking in any kind of nuance, and the timeline is so short that there is no way all 186 countries that got slapped with these tariffs are going to negotiate down before they go into effect. So it is going to be felt. It seems like I said we're in the Hulk smash scene.
Yeah,
And
but okay, but sorry to interrupt, but if we can move past, because I think we're falling into like what I'm seeing everyone else fall into here. Like there's a bigger picture play with other pegs on the stool. And I will say I've been watching Scott Bessent, I've been watching Howard Lutnick. They've been very clear about this. Tariffs are just one part, actually kind of a small part of the overall grander plan. Like what I would say to the arguments about manufacturing and our country, I think the most convincing argument for tariffs specifically, but also the rest of our economic plan is national security. Like Trump himself basically is predicting, or at least projecting, to make America stronger in the case of a global outbreak of some kind. Like whether that's war, whether that's another COVID or whatever, like we need to be prepared to be self-sustaining, and just as it stands right now, we are not. And we are too much in control of China. Like I was looking at our debt problem, and so someone who was actually, I've appreciated that he put this out because he's cautiously optimistic on the tariffs and the Trump economic plan. As someone that's been involved in macroeconomics for a long time, like his biggest issue is the debt. And a lot of these free trade people will be like, we don't have any problems, right? Unemployment's low, manufacturing's up, GDP's up.
yeah,
But
the economy's
they,
great. Don't
they
break
kind
it.
of
Yeah.
fail to realize, like, yes, the stock market was great when Joe Biden injected trillions of dollars into the currency, right? And inflated everything. And that's what we're dealing with now. Like people can't buy houses for affordable rates. Groceries went crazy. So like our debt problem, a 2025 estimate, we have $37 trillion in debt, 37 trillion. It's hard to even wrap your mind around that. Our debt to GDP ratio will be 124%. And net interest payments on the debt are going to approach $1 trillion, which is more than we spend on defense, right? There's a certain point, and the free traders will be like, debt doesn't matter. It can actually be leveraged. It can be good. Yes, to an extent, but there could be a point where people want to stop buying our debt. They don't feel like the conditions there.
Before.
Right. And Josh, you love this argument, and I completely agree with this, and Ray Dalio would be on your side on this. There's going to reach a point where people no longer see it as a good investment in buying America's debt because we keep going down this path. And my problem with it is the system that's currently propagated specifically by NAFTA and moving away from the Bretton Woods system, or I believe it was Bretton Woods system with the Nixon shock, is that basically how we've positioned ourselves economically and the new world trade order is we have to spend almost at suicidal levels in order to keep this thing going. So like, why do we have such a big trade deficit? Why do we spend more than we have right now? Because Europe's livelihood depends on us doing that. China's livelihood depends on us
model.
doing this. Right. And the problem is whenever there's a problem, we need to actually inject more government funds in what we did during COVID, further inflating the dollar. So we're just on basically a suicidal inflationary.
Our spending is like our eating habits.
Exactly. It's like there's a point where you get obese and you die. And so the argument that the Trump administration is like, we need to act. Scott Bessent's talked about this extensively. We have a patient on the table. We need to act before something horrible happens. And the free traders would say nothing horrible is happening. All our numbers are good. I'm like, numbers were great before the financial crash in 2008. Numbers were great before all these like horrible events happened that threw us in a recession. So yes, we'll take some short-term pain on
numbers
now.
in the 20s were great.
We'll reorganize the current trade regime. And I actually do think this could benefit in a lot of ways Europe.
Well, let me jump on what you're saying here.
Go for it.
There's a really good thread by this lady, Tanvi Ratna. She said that we have $9.2 trillion in debt that's going to mature here in 2025. And inflation lingers. Someone actually did a graph that showed how like our, the Biden inflation, how it's going, and then compared it to like what it was in the 70s and early 80s. And it's mirroring it, so like we had a big spike and then it kind of chilled out a little bit before having a second spike, 81, 82. That's what we're probably going to experience. So by doing this, like her point was, what is Trump doing? What's the whole point? And she says, well, if you got this $9.2 trillion, it's going to have to be refinanced in 2025. If it's rolled into 10-year bonds, every 1 basis drop in rates saves approximately $1 billion a year. So even a half point would save $500 billion over a decade. So lower yields free up fiscal room.
Yep.
This is what she's getting at. So like, how do you push the yields down on the 10-year notes, especially when a lot of money overseas is looking at, as I said before, this cryptocurrency and stuff like that. It's like it's getting harder to sell these 10-year treasuries. You're having to give higher rates. We want to get those rates lower. How do we get them lower?
Did you see that rates in the 3s, Josh? As of like yesterday, I think.
Yeah,
they're in 3 now.
Yeah.
This is good. Her point was, how do you push those down? You manufacture uncertainty. You sweep in a bunch of tariffs, spook the markets, trigger a risk off, money exits stocks, floods long-term treasuries. Boom. Suddenly it's a lot cheaper to refinance that. Now, that doesn't mean you should just go binge drinking on more spending, of course, but it does give you a chance to get things a little bit under control because we were facing a fiscal cliff with our debt.
No question.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely.
And it was going to take something extreme to change.
Yeah. And I think that the way that you put it, Josh, and to you too, Pogo, in terms of this is part of that piece. So when we are like applauding the cuts with Doge, when we're applauding the, taking down and saving money on federal workforce, Department of Education, this is of a piece of that. Like we're talking savings of billions of dollars potentially per year. So maybe I will amend from Hulk smash to like, now I'm going like Iron Man in Civil War. So a little bit more rationality behind it. Still a gamble, I think, but it's not an aberration in the Trump approach to reforming our government and following through on his campaign promises.
Yeah. Josh, are you familiar with the Nixon shock? I was trying to go back to see historical comparisons, and this would be eerily similar.
Yeah. I mean, look,
10% tariff, price controls.
Not a fan of the price controls as much, obviously.
And end of the gold standard.
That was that one. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I love Nixon in many ways. And obviously, as I say, the CIA pushed him out because he was a threat to the deep state.
But similar to Trump in a lot of ways, like trying to get America out of expensive wars that we shouldn't be involved in.
Absolutely.
Very polarizing candidate, rose up, comeback election.
Barely wins the first time, and then the next time wins 49 states because people liked what he had to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's all there. Also, I think missing in this whole conversation, I know we almost have to end, is we're talking about, we're all curious now what countries are going to do in response to the tariffs. And
that's the uncertainty.
Ray Dalio had a good thread on this, but basically it depends on, so like every country for the most part has like a centralized bank at some point. So they have different ways basically to deal with the tariff, and we're not sure. They could come to the table and say, hey, we're going to take them off. they could try to change their monetary policy to ease the effects of this. So I'm curious. We're not going to know for a while.
I think
But
we're going to see a lot of bilateral agreements.
yeah,
Trump will go to
that's what I
Saudi
think he's bringing
Arabia, he'll
people
go
to
to
the
France,
table.
he'll go whatever and get the deals. But I think
There was
we're
one.
going to stay in China for a while.
All of this is predicated upon the fact that right now and by design, we consume like by billions more than any other country. And the
Right.
idea being you need us. If you don't have us to sell to, you're making things to sell to nobody. You don't have the customer for it. Howard Lutnick has been very clear about this. And I agree to an extent. I think there is a way that you overplay your hand in that regard. But I do think if you're talking negotiating power, it's hard to want to be in any other seat than America right now.
We have
But
the upper hand, it would
Right.
appear.
No
Right.
question for a lot of these countries. Like,
And Trump did the impossible.
what was
What's
that?
that?
He actually got Democrats to be against taxes.
I saw that. Didn't Gavin Newsom come out and be like, we need to look?
although tariffs, you think about like you think about it in a revolutionary way of like it's just a tax on other countries for the luxury of taking part in the American market with the most customers, the most certainty, the strongest laws. And I like that thinking of basically
100%.
he's promising to not have federal taxes for people that make under 150K. Now, who would be most mad about that? It would be the 1% that have benefited from this free trade agreement in which they've shipped factories overseas to the lowest possible cost. Like he would be choosing his base.
Well, and again, I guess what I would say to the libertarians is that if you had a pure free market, pure free trade, free market, I know, but if we got to be more so, is it the case that we would see, the wealthiest 1% get increasingly wealthy and push out and crowd out people from being able to get stuff done? That might be the case. That's, look, when we had probably the most free market in our country, like the 1880s to like 1910 or whatever, what happened? The wealthiest got super, super, super wealthy. It was like a libertarian paradise. And then what happened? The people who were at the bottom are like, this is terrible. And then we get Woodrow Wilson and FDR, and it destroyed our whole republic. So let's not
do that again.
Let's have, the more normalized kind of balance on these things. Like Ronald Reagan, everyone, he's the godfather of modern American conservatism. Everyone always invokes him for everything. And the right likes to pretend like he's a neocon. They like to pretend like he's a uber psycho free trader all the time. And it's like, he put tariffs, on Kawasaki motorcycles to help bail out Harley Davidson. He put out tariffs on Japanese cars to help bail out the big three. And what happened? The American people were thankful. It's like, well,
yeah, that was a great targeted use of the tariff as a tool.
Well, and then they're like, well, then Americans had to pay more for cars, than they would have normally. Yeah, but they also didn't decimate, like entire states like Ohio and Michigan. So
yeah, I think what I'd like to add on that is it feels like why this even came to be is because the contract, it feels like that the American government owes to the American people has been violated in so many different ways. And you brought it up with just like rapid expansion of wealth for the 1% when the lowest in society that don't own stocks or assets or bonds, anything like that, have just seen inflation basically kill their opportunities to live the American dream. And I think those hollowed out spots in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, like levels of betrayal, because not only were there, good paying, good lives, jobs. Yes, maybe you pay a little bit more for a refrigerator, but they lived good lives in their hometowns that generations had lived from, sent overseas. And then they were also flooded with illegal labor in which they could in no ways compete with, also flooded with drugs that like opioids that were sold to them like candy. And now they live destitute lives in their hometowns that have been completely transformed overnight. And so whether or not you agree with technically how this is done, I think philosophically it makes sense. Donald Trump is putting those people first. If he just wanted to keep the status quo, he would just keep the status quo, and the 1% super wealthy businesses, the S&P would be roaring, whatever. But there's always a bailout of some kind based on your policies. And you mentioned the bailout in that case being tariffs from Reagan or whatever. But think about 2008. Think about these times when the government just bailed out, Wall Street, just bailed out people during COVID. And that ended up making the average American's lives worse. through inflation and buying power being gone. And so something needed to be done to correct it.
This
I
is a
think this is
bailout
the
of the
attempt.
worker.
Right. This is a bailout actually of the working American, hopefully. And like, I get the political risk because it could backfire and people might not understand it. It might not come into effect until 20 years later, something like that. I get it. But if he pulls it off, I mean, at this point, no doubt, Trump will be remembered for better or worse.
He will be remembered
till the end of time.
There's no doubt.
There's no doubt.
Consequential man of history.
That is
Absolutely.
a safe prediction, Pogo. Good job.
No question. So
we will remember Trump.
All right, let's talk a little death penalty. Josh, we actually saved this specifically for you. So Pam Bondi, Attorney General, has directed prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione. For those who don't remember, he murdered the healthcare CEO in cold blood, which also this whole tariff conversation hilarious because I'm now seeing liberals use it.
It wasn't like he was walking down the street and he hit him up at an ATM or something. He would
but everyone was saying, free
right.
Luigi, cheering him on. And then now they're flipping around and being like, can't you see the stock market is red? Like all of a sudden they're in love. You leave those multinational corporations alone. How dare you? A little bit of hypocrisy, but
it's
anyway.
A living.
He murdered CEO, healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, premeditated cold-blooded assassination. One of the federal charges against Mangione, murder through use of a firearm, makes him eligible for the death penalty if convicted. So that brings up now a little bit of a debate here at this point, being Catholic. Do you think this is an appropriate and judicial use of force against premeditated assassin? Or do you think this violates Catholic social teaching and or Catholic doctrine? Where are we with this, Josh?
Well, one of the things about the Catholic social doctrine about this is that if there's a way for society to protect the criminal and prevent him from doing further harm, we should try to not do the death penalty. I don't agree with that argument. I think that it lacks in many ways. I'm in Ed Fazer's side of things, that the punishment of the death penalty is the punishment should be commensurate with the crime, commensurate with the crime. In this case, I do think taking the life is necessary. Now, first of all, just because you could put him in a prison for the next 50 years and he couldn't escape and cause further damage doesn't mean he can't create further damage in jail. I mean, the fact is he could write letters and people smuggle them out and publish, and he could talk about write a little manifesto encouraging other people to do this kind of stuff. Like, I think it was a tragedy that, serial killers like Marilyn Manson were executed. Like, why are you able to do interviews with media? Like, this is horrible to me. There was the one guy who was a murderer and he attacked children. He did all these paintings. And he was going to put them for sale. And thankfully, the guy who bought them bought all the paintings and then burned them. It's like, no, we're not going to allow your legacy to continue. Like,
right.
It is time for you to say goodbye, make right with the Lord and say goodnight. That's what I say. So I want this punishment to be like, yeah, you know what? You're not going to be in a nice little federal penitentiary for the next 40 years or 30 years and hopefully get out on good behavior. Like, you're done. And we want to try to encourage people because this feels almost more like an assassination, even though this guy was not a senator.
It was an assassination, right?
Yeah, it's motivated. It's not a crime of passion. It's not like he found this guy in bed with this girl or something like that. It was a conscious, premeditated action in a society that this is where it's like, why do you think we're as maybe you think we're a little bit more secure than we really are. Like, we're not too far away from like society kind of unraveling. I mean, I think sometimes we sort of overestimate how close we are. Look, I was out of power for 5 days. And let me tell you something, people get a little crazy. They get a little crazy. Things start breaking down. Society, thankfully, power is getting restored to places and stuff like that. But like, let me tell you something, like people, like this one business, the windows got smashed and all their cash was stolen. I mean, stuff that would never have happened in my little town, hardly, and we're not that far away. Like, what happened in George Floyd when he was,
Well, did you see the kid that got stabbed at the track meet?
In Texas?
That's the one that keeps going around. It's terrible.
I did, and that didn't make headlines like George Floyd because the victim was white. It was, a black guy murdering a white guy. Then suddenly, the media falls asleep. They don't care.
Right. Or we had the pro-life the pro-life journalist getting attacked in New York City for doing man on the street interviews, right? That was just yesterday.
Priest in Kansas just got shot.
Just got
as well.
shot yesterday, right?
Killed.
I mean,
Wasn't he
we're
killed?
becoming a
Yeah.
more violent
Pray for the repose of his
society.
soul.
Yeah, I think too, aside from the issue of, does the death penalty removing them from like we should remove them from causing danger to others in the prison, to their guards, to having access to the media, to continue their legacy. I think also we lose sight of the fact that the idea of retributive justice is central to the Judeo-Christian, to the biblical worldview, and that the right of nations to impose the death penalty in certain cases, it's not just about removing someone from society for that society, but it's also the sense that of our sin and our guilt, there are things we do that merit death, right? And not at the hands of the church, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and all that, but that the state retains the authority to adjudicate when that line's been crossed and when an action that a human being undertakes in cold blood, premeditated, actually merits death. And that's another point that Ed Fazer has made in his book. I would highly recommend anyone who's struggling with this to read By Man Shall His Blood Be Shed by Ed Fazer. Maybe we can throw that in the chat for everybody. Really good rundown of that. But this idea that somehow as a society, we've become more and more Christian and progressed in gospel values as we move away from the death penalty, to me is just laughable and ignorant of historical trends. And I was reading through Cardinal Avery Dulles, who's a hero of mine, son of the was it Secretary of State Dulles? Anyway, so Cardinal Avery Dulles, he actually supported abolishing the death penalty in the West. And that's another point, right? That for Western nations, for, Pope Francis to come out and say, we have progressed beyond the death penalty, it is now inadmissible, and thereby ignoring the bulk of the world's prison systems, and even asking the question if they can keep, their society safe from all these convicted murderers. So Cardinal Dulles supports the abolition of the death penalty in the West, and he acknowledged that, to quote, most opposition to capital punishment today reflects not deep moral insight, but actually a move away from Christian morality. And he wrote, many governments in Europe and elsewhere have eliminated the death penalty in the 20th century, often against the protests of religious believers. While this change may be viewed as moral progress, it is probably due, in part, to the evaporation of the sense of sin, guilt, and retributive justice, all of which are essential to biblical religion and the Catholic faith. The abolition of the death penalty in formerly Christian countries may owe more to secular humanism than to deeper penetration into the gospel, which I think is a really interesting way of looking at this and talking about the death penalty. Thomas Aquinas also, another argument that I think Tom McCluskey, if you're listening, Tom, we love you, he brought up on Wednesday when we were previewing this conversation. And he said, well, the longer we keep them alive, the longer they have to repent and believe in the gospel, which on face value, I know, which on face value sounds like, okay, great. But here's what Thomas Aquinas had to say in response to this very argument. He said, the fact that the wicked are able to amend while alive does not prevent their being justly slain. In the hour of death, they are able to repent and be converted to God, as are we all, right? We all know in the hour of death, we will all have all the grace we need to repent. And if they be so obstinate that in the hour of death their heart does not abandon its wickedness, it may be reckoned with sufficient probability that they will never recover from their evil ways.
I would also say that I find that the poorest argument of them all, because I do feel like knowing that the hour of your own death clears the mind.
Oh, yeah.
But also, we didn't execute Jeffrey Dahmer. He was that vicious serial killer in Wisconsin for the 80s.
Do not watch the docuseries.
He just got killed with a shiv in
Zac Efron one?
He didn't know when he was going to die. So there's not that point. So he's dead now. He didn't have that ability to reflect, which, of course, a lot of the victims of these people didn't have that ability either. But yeah, you know what? That's
Can I ask then? It just feels like the conversation around this, which I really hate the word inadmissible. It's like a unicorn word that doesn't mean anything. But Pope John Paul II was instrumental in trying to curtail the use of the death penalty, at least in terms of altering doctrine. And then Pope Francis has been very strong on especially in the West, no one should use the death penalty.
He changed the catechism to say
Right.
that. Right.
So why? Why would that? The argument being that
Well,
we
look,
have
I feel
sufficient
like-
means to keep people.
I feel like there's a lot of cheap grace in modern life, and people just feel like they can show that they're more compassionate. Oh no, let's not do that. And I'm not assigning that to necessarily to Pope Francis, although I'm not necessarily exempting him. There is this ability that people get to feel like, like cheap public virtues. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm against racism. Oh, I would never do that. And then I get to stand for the trans kids because they're being, discriminated against and bullied against. This is a cheap efforts to try to, we call
virtue
it
signaling would probably be the term.
Virtue signaling is way I get to signal how virtuous I am to everyone else. And the death penalty is definitely that for Christians. Like, oh, I'm against that. That's so barbaric. I would never be in favor of that. Like, okay, just go sit down. You're not bringing anything constructive to this debate. I don't find it helpful at all.
Are you concerned with the use of state sanctioned force against someone potentially for reasons you don't agree with? So, like, you could get to a point where,
like,
yes.
Jesus.
He said it,
and even he didn't say that it was an unjust punishment.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I argue against
It
that?
is Lent. I mean, we're coming up on the Passion. That's Good Friday's coming.
Like, you wouldn't be concerned about it being weaponized against people that are innocent.
It has been weaponized against Christians to this
day. That's always a
day.
concern, right?
Absolutely.
Primarily against Christians.
And so
probably,
would your argument be right? But so in America, though, like, is it a bad argument to make that the chilling in, like, so say we were to use the death penalty against like horrible rapists or horrible child predators or something like that?
In fact,
isn't it good?
And Erica said, except for the church. I'm like, no. Who said except for the church? Dude, if I ever were elected Pope, probably wouldn't happen. Death penalty for priests to molest children.
Yeah,
extradited to the Holy See.
But the church does not carry out the death penalty. That's the whole point of church.
Why couldn't the Holy See have the death penalty?
All right, now we've gone to the other.
You know what? Maybe my issue with this is maybe the people that bring it up are like have kind of a morbid fascination with it and get a little too gung ho of like, we just need to be killing people, right? Like, more people need to be killed. Maybe that's my issue rather than the principle of, because like someone in the chat brought up, like, there's examples where like DNA don't match and 20 people get put on death row and killed. And like, that's bad.
Right, but there's no way you're someone. No. Two things can be true at once, right? That the death penalty is an admissible tool that the state can use in order to carry out retributive justice. That can be true. And it can also be true that it has been poorly used by states in the past. So the two arguments aren't like, when we have this feeling that, because it's been poorly used and Christians have been executed by states in the past, so we need no more death penalty. That's not the issue. The issue is that we need moral clarity and moral formation of those who lead our countries in order to use the death penalty correctly. But to say that it's just blanket statement inadmissible and not define that or give the theological or philosophical argument for that, and we're going to change the catechism so that we can say that and feel better about ourselves like we're some moral progressives, that is unhelpful and it's just untrue.
Yeah, like on the DNA stuff, like if we find out that, we need to change things and change our procedures so that we can, alleviate the number of times we'll get it wrong. Yeah, obviously, let's do those things. I mean, like, but it's one, if someone says, well, I can never support the death penalty if one time it was used wrongly, like, well, it was used wrong on Jesus, obviously.
Yeah, that's just a dumb argument.
Like, to me,
if
it's done recklessly and many times, then like, whoa, change it. But in this case, this Luigi guy, there's no debate. I mean, everyone knows he killed him. I mean, like, and so the question is, if there ever were a case for the death penalty, this guy, that, hey, your number's up, bro, you deserve it.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll repent facing that firing squad. He'll be like, whoa, now, Jesus, forgive me. And that's the whole goal. Like, Aquinas will conclude with, the entire goal of the death penalty is the conversion and salvation of the criminal.
Well, I think that's one goal.
Well, the fundamental goal. Thank you for correcting me. You were right. The driving desire.
I think
salvation of all
we've
souls.
reached the
Oh,
end of this debate. Although
okay.
Phaser makes a great point too about modern Catholicism treating certain topics with the utmost nuance, and then basically things that were never consensus before the last 20, 30 years, and then things that basically were not settled science at all, now treating them with utmost nuance. Like it actually, if you do lay it all out there, you're like, yeah, that actually is an interesting change and probably not very consistent logically. Okay, I want to hear about the Orchid, Erica. I know we don't have a ton of time for you here, but I'm like nervous and I have not I did not dive into it almost intentionally because it freaks me out. But what are we dealing with here?
Okay, well, this New York Times piece blew up the internet this week. We have the first designer babies are here. And I don't know if you can play this video a little bit. We have no sound. This is the founder meeting the first orchid baby who is born. All right, so that's the New York Times piece. Oh, yes, and it says this baby was carefully selected as an embryo. Her mother screened for gender and health during IVF. And they have this beautiful little child there. So basically what happened is this company Orchid rolled out in December. It's a screening process for people using IVF that does an entire genome sequencing screening. It sequences more than 99% of an embryo's DNA and estimates the risk of conditions, including irregular heart rhythm. My godson just was born with an irregular heart rhythm, adult onset blindness, inflammatory bowel diseases, types 1 and 2 diabetes, breast cancer, and some psychiatric conditions. These things, founder Noor Siddiqui, who wrote this op-ed or was featured in the op-ed, says in her promo video, quote, "Sex is for fun. Embryo screening is for babies. It's going to become insane not to screen for these things." Now, these things, we were presuming, refer to conditions also like obesity, autism, both of which Orchid boasts that it can screen for. What they talk about less is that it also can screen for things like projected IQ and height.
Oh, yeah. How would you even screen for that?
Well, dude, I mean, I am not a biologist, but they say they can.
Interesting.
And it must be true.
Like, are you showing babies Rorschach tests or something in the womb? And you're like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. So, hey, if you can play that top video there, this is just crazy. If you could go up to 556, this is Noor, the founder, and she's describing her own process of using Orchid to produce her child.
Ended up having to take 0 days off work. Yeah, it really wasn't too bad. It was like 15 minutes, you're out of there. And then they're like, hey, we got 20 eggs and 16 embryos. Yeah, it just makes me feel way more confident going into a pregnancy, knowing that like the things that I'm most worried about, I have a reasonable estimate on. This is the genetic component of risk that this child is going to inherit.
And then they're showing you the screening that you get.
Just have them,
you can cut that.
The freezer.
They're showing you there for every embryo that's produced. And she said they got 16 embryos for her first pregnancy there. For every embryo, they give you a checklist and a rundown of the likelihood of that child growing into someone with obesity, with an IQ of 45, with, adult onset blindness.
Can I ask a question, clarifying question?
Yeah,
is this only for IVF right now? Or is this for any, like, could you screen a current pregnant person, like pregnant mother? Oh my gosh, I caught myself there. A pregnant mother with, an embryo.
My understanding is that these embryos that are being tested, they're extracting cells for them while they're in the petri dishes.
Got it. Okay,
so
just
having
IVF.
an embryo in the womb would not happen.
Okay.
But a few points here that I just want to make. Obviously, this is. I don't know if anyone's read That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. This is like every dystopian novel that you ever read from the late 20th century coming true. I mean, Aldous Huxley comes to mind, all of these guys.
You were warned.
You were warned. Yeah, I don't want to say I told you so, but we kind of got that. Watching the mother talk to the founders here and holding her little infant son who's now 3 months old. So the first children produced by this technology are now either 3 to 5 months old, or they're frozen in stasis, or they're dead because they were discarded. We're talking about the majority of them being frozen or dead. This idea that babies are somehow this sort of like add-on feature to human flourishing, specifically women's flourishing, that we can just extract the baby making process from sex entirely is so warped and backwards as to be, there's no other word for it than demonic, because what Satan does is he takes what's good, true, and beautiful, he turns it completely upside down, and he says good is bad and bad is good. And again, it's this lie being told to these people that you can control the outcome of your child's life. You can determine before that child is even implanted in your womb what their adulthood will look like, how much suffering in their life you can prevent. And really, let's be honest, how much suffering in your life as a parent you can avoid by designing these babies who won't have these health conditions. It's eliminating blindness. It's therapy by eliminating blind people. And so scary, must be resisted. But we can't help ourselves, can we? Right? Like we're like, we can do this, and so we're going to.
It's interesting you brought up C.S. Lewis, Josh, because it people wonder like why are sorry, you did, but liberal arts education, like why do we care anymore? Why is it important to read humanities? Why is it important to this? And it's like you just brought it up, Erica, of like how do we eliminate any type of suffering, even perceived suffering or something that might not have even occurred yet in the future or whatever. It's a complete misdiagnosis of what the purpose of life is.
Right.
And if you didn't have any philosophical underpinnings beyond consequentialism of like, how do we maximize utility and lower pain, this would 100% make sense. And like every time we bring up Elon Musk, something positive, I always get people in my comments or like emails like, he's a transhumanist. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm not dumb. Okay. Here's the tweet. As I mentioned several years ago, it increasingly appears that humanity is a biological bootloader for digital super intelligence. Wasn't thrilled about this. And I have very clear philosophical differences than with Elon Musk going around town, having babies with whoever. You know, he's got some bizarre views. I think in coalition politics, you work with people that want to advance your ends. And I think he's a good partner in a lot of ways, but certainly not a perfect one. Not one that I like. Hopefully he doesn't kill us all in the end, but the alternative is better. So yeah, sorry, Josh, I interrupted you, but I wanted to get that one in.
No, it's okay. I mean, this feels like, SAT prep writ large, like all the moms in the suburbs are like desperately trying to make sure their kids do, here's the instrument you're going to play, and here's the sport you're going to play, and here's the 3 clubs in the volunteer work you're going to play, and you're going to max out on your ACT score, and you're going to get into Princeton, and, and this is going to be the ticket.
Sometimes you don't.
And then it's just like, and then you don't get accepted because you're white. And, everyone freaks out, and it's like, what is going on? And you just have to ask yourself, like, why are we trying to do this to ourselves and to our children? Like what kind of pressure are we putting on them? Like we're expecting them to be perfect. And this is the idea, like I'm only going to have 2 kids, and so they better be manufactured in a lab so they're absolutely pristine and perfect. Like, and what's going to happen? And you're going to screen out for all this stuff, and then you're going to end up with a civilization where, there's no dreamers. There's no people who are,
Can I wrap this episode in a bow? I'd like to
do it
because I can't take credit
for
this.
Tie it to tariffs, Tom.
Tucker brought this up, but like, what is the purpose of an economy? What is the purpose of giving birth, having children? The purpose of it, and the reason I bring this up is like some people worship this free hand of the market that goods should flow to the lowest whatever, and they worship it. I'm like, if the economy is not serving the American people, the American economy is not serving the American people, then then burn it to the ground, right? If it's causing people to not be able to have homes, feed their children, have a single parent household, raise strong families, allow opportunities for like entrepreneurs to become dreamers and create new things. If it's just going to turn us all into slaves, then burn it to the ground. It's not serving its purpose. Same thing here. Like if the purpose of giving birth is to just genetically modify the most superior being that's the smartest and most attractive or whatever, then we need to stop. Like we have gone too far. We have lost the plot. That is not.
And this is the ultimate. I feel like genetic testing for your own children is the ultimate gamble that you're so convinced that there is not a God, because this is taking the advice of the serpent in the book, in the book of Genesis, that ye shall be gods. Like you are determining everything. And this is the biggest problem I have with white suburban people Like I'm looking myself in the mirror. These are my people. Like this is the biggest problem I have is you want to exert control over everything. And look at all the lies we have. Planned Parenthood. Like you want to have everything. You want to make sure the
It's
kids
all
get in.
planned.
Yeah, you kids going to get into Harvard and everything's going to be fine. It's like, you know what? What are you preparing for? Like
100%.
you're not promised tomorrow. None of us are. Stop it. Like
Right.
get in right with yourself. Get it right with God and stop trying to, I mean, I just find it the ultimate hubris. Like even when I was an atheist for a few years, this still would give me the absolutely would give me the
The
chills.
heebie-jeebies, as my dad would.
Yeah, because
Like-
you saw Gattaca.
Right. Gattaca was not a prescription. It was a cautionary tale. Don't go there. Don't be Gattaca mom.
Someone get that in front of Elon Musk ASAP, bro.
Yeah.
Jeez. All right. Twilight Zone, Josh.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't even know if I want to show this, but I thought this was an April Fool's joke.
Okay.
They're redoing the movie The Naked Gun.
Oh, I did see that.
And they have
man.
Liam Neeson as,
It didn't
Frank
work.
Drebin.
It didn't work. I saw it too.
I watched the trailer. I am one who loves slapstick comedy,
It's the best.
lowbrow comedy. Like people are like you. Why do you like that? I love it. I slop it up like let's go. Give me another serving. I'm ready. And I watched this whole trailer, and I'm like, I did not laugh at all. It was just dumb. And as one guy said, Liam Neeson, you're way too old and rich for this. Pascal Emmanuel Gabri refers to this as stuck culture.
Yes.
And he also noted that The Simpsons and Family Guy were renewed for 4 more seasons.
Oh my god.
Oh my
We can blame Seth MacFarlane for all this.
We're so
He's
old.
got his fingerprints on all this stuff.
Oh my goodness. It's
mean,
not
like-
stuck culture. No,
he's
it's
a
not
genius.
stuck.
It's stuck.
This is
We
like-
can't think of anything new.
Circling the toilet bowl culture. We're just circling.
I guess we'll need to do a few more comic book movies because we haven't thought of that.
Josh, so Eric and I, big fans of Critical Drinker. Shout out him. He's great. But he said that Snow White was the death, hopefully like the nail in the coffin of woke culture. But people need to be concerned, almost potentially more concerned for what comes next. It's slop culture. Because if the message isn't introduced anymore, like the message, big capital,
The
woke,
message.
whatever, people are just going to keep like cannibalizing IPs that people know about and making them terrible. And so they're not
IPs
even
or what? What are you talking about?
intellectual property. So
Okay.
it'd be like Naked Gun or Snow White in this case, or they just did
Avengers.
another one, Avengers, yeah. Or I'm talking even further back, but they're just taking stuff that people to get Minecraft, great example, and they're not making good movies and they don't have any woke messaging, but they're still crap. Like we've escaped one problem into this new problem of just like recycled crap that means nothing and no one cares about. So it's like, where have we gone?
Right.
We're circling the toilet. We're circling the drain.
Slop. Like
Slop.
there's no way that's going to be good. And because all the things that made Naked Gun funny, they can't do anymore. All the things that made Airplane funny, they can't do anymore. We need tariffs on Hollywood. We do.
I love it. Bring it on
I can't
home.
watch any movie
Tariffs on
made
Hollywood.
after 2016. I think the last great comedy movie, and not for everyone, but The Hangover. I think the Hangover film was
That's
the
funny.
last great American comedy movie. Nothing good has been made since then.
And even that, the problem is it did so well. They're like, we need to do another one, and we need to be even grosser. It's like, really?
Yeah.
No, not really. Like
No.
the first one was funny because it was inventive. Like there were some
Yep.
gross parts in it. No, I get it, but like,
Listen, use VidAngel, do what you got to do, guys. I'm talking about for adult audiences. And like, this is someone who's like 27 now. I've watched a lot of those type of movies in my 20s. But yeah, like it was actually funny. And because you can actually be transgressive, and what makes comedy is pushing the boundaries.
Right.
And there's tasteful ways to do it. And there's also crappy ways to do it, which we've seen plenty of.
It turns
But,
out there's
yeah.
there's no transgressive when you've blown all the boundaries out of the water. So like it's just like not even funny or new or exciting anymore.
I see
Get it.
someone in the chat saying you can't do Blazing Saddles anymore.
Certainly
my
you
friend,
cannot.
my friend made
No.
the point that
You
know
can't even do
30
The
years.
Office anymore.
What was it? 50 years ago, Blazing Saddles comes out, and no one even thought, oh, that was funny, no big deal. Now, no way they'd ever make it. Whereas
No.
Caligula came out, and everyone was scandalized. Today, it would be like you could throw it on basic cable, who would even care?
Yeah, Blazing Saddles is like upheld on a pillar of what you cannot do anymore, which is true. Airplane, I love Airplane too. Maybe
love
Josh and I
Airplane.
share that common love.
But no Irish.
Yeah.
Roger, check your vector.
Really, like it still makes me laugh every time I think of it. Is the I speak jive?
Oh,
And
that's
the
the
old
best
white
part of
lady
that
like
one.
snapping into the.
That grandma, and I just about lost it.
That was so good, man.
We've gone from C.S. Lewis to Airplane. This is good.
And that's the LOOPcast experience,
that's the
baby. And tariffs. Okay, Erica, what do you got?
All right. So I don't care about women's fencing at all, but I do care about the issue of men beating up women in sword fighting. So U.S. fencing black carded Stephanie Turner at a state championship. This is at the collegiate level. So she was a woman. She's a woman fencer, and she refused to fence with a man who now calls himself a woman. This happened at the Division I women's foil event at the Cherry Blossom Tournament at University of Maryland this week. Sullivan, the man who says he's a woman, had actually competed against men until October of 2023. Here's the video.
Yeah, I'll just play it while you talk. But
you can see here they're getting ready to fence. She sees who her opponent is going to be, and she taps in, and then she just takes a knee. And Redmond was under the impression, she said, so this is after the fact, Sullivan did some interviews. She said, Redmond was under the impression that I was going to start fencing. So when I took a knee, I looked at the ref and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I am a woman. This is a man. And this is a women's tournament. And I will not fence this individual. The man didn't hear her. So you can see in the video, like he comes up to her. He says, oh, are you hurt? He doesn't understand what's happening. And he asks, are you okay? And she said, I'm sorry, I have much love and respect for you, but I will not fence you. Turner was then taken back into a back room with the panel of judges. She's issued a black card, which apparently in women's fencing is usually reserved for unsportsmanlike conduct, disruptive behavior, physical violence, verbal threats, or cheating.
Jeez.
And again, like this is what has to keep happening. So props to Stephanie. Took some guts to do this, even in women's fencing. Like you can scoff and say, oh, it's just women's fencing. It's just a game. But for her.
You see the statement?
Yeah, the statement from USA Fencing. This is ridiculous. So USA Fencing, it says, this is their official response to the story breaking.
Oh, they can go to,
We remain committed to fostering an inclusive, respectful community for everyone except biological women in our sport. We believe in the principle of creating safe communities where all athletes, blah, 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 have a place. While we understand there is a range of perspectives, USA Fencing will continue to engage in respectful.
What is it? This means nothing. This is
dialogue.
All nothing words.
Right. And there's no place for hate speech or targeted hate of any kind. I'm like taking a knee because you are a 5'3" small petite woman and you say, I will not fence a 6'1" bulky male athlete because, oh, I don't know, except in like Mulan, women shouldn't be sword fighting men in general. That somehow that's hateful for me to be like, I'm not going to do this. Props to Stephanie.
You know what?
And every female athlete needs to stand up and do the same thing. It's not enough for a one-off every like women's fencing. This has to be a massive refusal to play the game, to say the lie. We're not going to do it anymore.
Your reference of Mulan, I'm glad you made it because Mulan was actually legitimately good, but then sparked like a billion ridiculous women empowerment thing after it. So I don't even know if it's worth the squeeze.
It's like girl boss movie.
But what bothers me about this is that we even have to put this young woman in this position. Like this is because of the cowardice of like hundreds of men who are part of these decisions. And like to have to even put her in the position to have to sacrifice anything really is just it's not just. It's a complete lack of justice and prudence and
100%
total
and
cowardice.
It's just amazing.
It makes me so mad.
That
Ridiculous.
In the 1970s, when more traditionally minded and conservative minded people were against women playing sports because they thought it wasn't really feminine. And there's still some people who hold that opinion today, and I'm not condemning them for it. That's fine. I don't have a problem with my girls playing sports, but it is remarkable that it is the conservatives who are rallying to the defense of women to play sports, and it is the feminists and the liberals who are saying, no, we want dudes with a sexual fetish to be able to cosplay as girls and play just like everyone else. And it's, again, because of that cheap virtue that we get, that cheap grace that we get out of feeling like we're conquering prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
There was such a demand for conquering prejudice that we're doing stupid things today.
We're instituting new prejudices.
Yeah. Welcome back, Josh. It's so good to have you back. I'm going to go fun. I'm actually pumped on this one. I've laughed at it so many times. So Mars is loose. Mars is loose in DC.
Call Elon.
Call Elon. Get your boy. Mars is out. The Kennedy Center had a giant inflatable Mars, and I'm going to get copyrighted if I play because they use Bruno Mars's song. Look at this thing, dude. Over to the YouTube. A humongous Mars inflatable is just rolling down the road in DC outside the Kennedy Center. Look at this thing go.
Trees.
It's
I was
going
power
on
for
the
a few
street.
days. The world goes crazy.
Is this a sign? Should we be interpreting this differently? They got him back. They got Mars back. Mars is back, but for a good couple hours, Mars was just rolling down the freeway, causing problems in DC. So
at the Kennedy Center, no less. They're going to blame Trump on this. They're going to be like, if Trump hadn't cut the Kennedy Center budget, Mars would have been secured. But this is actually really funny to watch.
Hysterical. I wish I could put the audio on because they play the Bruno Mars soundtrack, which is probably going to get copyrighted. But the people just laughing so hard watching this thing roll from their apartment, it just really warms my heart. Yeah. I almost I want to kind of imagine in my head that this is Gru from Despicable Me, trying to steal the planet, and that there's someone inside of it who just used free will and just hopped inside and just rolling around trying to get it out of there. But anyway,
good way to end the week.
That's where I leave. I'll leave on a funny note. Someone asked if I got a suit and tie sponsor. No. Josh wore a suit coat one time, and he basically tariff bluffed me into wearing full suit and tie. So hopefully that's how the rest of the economy goes. But yeah.
Well, and I would just like to add real quick, again, so thankful to all the hardworking men. This is a time where Northern Michigan is welcoming toxic masculinity, as hundreds of men from all around the state and other states are coming up to Northern Michigan to restore power. We had lost it for 5 days. My friend, she still doesn't have power. Someone down the street from me doesn't have power. It's painstaking. And I'd just like to say, for all those moms and dads out there, boy, you want your kid, you want your son to make a lot of money and always have a nice pickup truck. Boy, being a lineman, you make some real good money.
It's dangerous work.
It is dangerous work.
It is.
Yeah.
But they don't have gender studies majors doing that stuff. They have the real deal.
Oh man, happy to have you back. Yeah. Thank you so much for everyone joining today. Appreciate you guys. If you want to help us out, actually, let me know your thoughts on tariffs. LOOPcast@catholicvote.org. I'll throw that out there. I felt like Charlie Day, the red lines. I thought I was a tariff by the end of it. It was crazy. It was insane. The last 24 hours have been, all I can think about is tariffs. That's it. So let me know if we're right or wrong or what you think. LOOPcast@catholicvote.org, or drop a comment on the YouTube. You can also comment on Spotify and Apple. I do read those. Someone said that I'm a lib now because I disagree with Trump on something. That's your choice to think. But yeah, leave those comments. It's fun. I enjoy seeing them. If you want to support the show, join the Champions Club. Best way to support, catholicvote.org/champions. Thank you for all of our champions listening today. We appreciate you guys so much. And pray for us. It's the best way to help us out. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for Brian. His confirmation's coming up. I know lots of people thinking about
confirmation
Brian.
hearing. Yeah, that's right.
Is that next week, Tuesday?
No, it's on Tuesday. Yep. So
all right, when we get him in,
full team coverage of that on next Wednesday.
Yes.
And I know you guys celebrated the Loop's 10th anniversary while I was gone.
We did,
But
Josh.
I won't show you because you'll freak out, Tom. But I am wearing my Loop socks today because it's still the 10th anniversary week.
Yes.
That's right. It's the octave of the nativity.
Huge accomplishment, Josh. Congratulations.
Yep.
But yes, once we get Brian through, we got to get him on the show, right? Like he can come on once he's through.
Just so people understand, this is his hearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They're not even going to vote on his nomination on Tuesday. They're just going to hear from him. They're going to ask him questions. The senator is going to do a lot of follow-up questions. That's going to take a lot of time. Then the Senate goes into Easter recess. So he still may not get confirmed by the committee and then confirmed by the Senate. That all this stuff takes time. It may be May, maybe June before he's over in Rome.
Gotcha. I would love to get him on. He should come on with some gelato or something. He's over in Rome. Hopefully, we
I
get
think
him
after he gets confirmed, he'll be more able to talk about everything.
Yeah.
But you're up for Senate confirmation. You got to be careful about what you say.
True. I just love to imagine a hypothetical situation in which Josh is in front of the committee.
How many Republicans would we need in the Senate for me to get confirmed?
No, dude, there would not be a number enough.
118.
We need a full Republican to get Josh through.
You get Alex Jones confirmed the Supreme Court, right?
That is a dream scenario. Get Josh in front of the Senate.
So much better than Alex Jones, Josh.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, hey, have a great weekend, guys. And we'll see you